I am working on Butterick 5743. You can see the sizes are in the upper right hand corner, sizes 2, 3, 4, and 5. These very roughly coordinate to the average size that a child will be at ages 2, 3, 4, and 5. On the back of the pattern, we have up here at the top is the measurements, the chest measurement. Here's the sizes. Size 2 chest measurement is 21. Size 2 waist measurement is 20, and so on. I'm going to be making a size 6, so the chest measurement should be around 25, and the waist 22, hip 26. If we look on here, it says that this is an easy pattern. That means that it should be easy enough for a beginner to make. We're working, it says that dresses A, B, and C have raised waist, tie ends, back zipper, and narrow hem. I'm going to skip over A and B because I'm working on C. C has self-lined cap sleeves, and C has a lined bodice. Skirt B and C are cut on the crosswise grain of the fabric. Down here it tells me these are the sizes again, sizes 2, 3, 4, and 5. If I had the bigger version of this pattern, it would be the sizes 6, 7, and 8. It tells me that for, here I'm doing size 6. Size 6 I am doing pattern version C. So if I have a 45-inch wide fabric, then I'm going to need 2 and 5/8 yards. If I had a 60-inch wide, then I would need 1 and 5/8. This is all important information you need to be able to read on the back of the pattern, so you can make your fabric purchases. And it recommends broadcloth, madras, linen, satin. It says that it's unsuitable for obvious diagonals. That means something with like stripes. And it tells me what notions I need. I'm doing version C again. I need a hook and eye, which I'm going to skip because I typically skip that, and a 14-inch zipper. It says that the finished garment measurements are printed on the pattern tissue. So here it shows me the line drawing for version C right here. I've made this dress, I guess, 4 times already, and I haven't ever done it with the ties. So I'm considering putting the ties on it this time because it is roomy in the waist, and I think the ties would look nice. That is everything for the back of the pattern. This side of the pattern is for Spanish speaking pattern makers. I just pulled the pattern out of the envelope. This is the pattern instructions. This is page 1 of 4 pages. It again shows me my line drawings. I'm doing version C. This shows me a list of all the parts, and I can say, oh, part number 1 or pattern piece number 1 is the tie end, and I just look for pattern piece number 1. That's right here, so that's the tie end, and that's how I can figure out when I'm trying to figure out what's what. I can go through here and match it up to what kind of shape I'm going to be looking for, because the big pieces of tissue paper that your pattern is printed on are kind of unwieldy, so sometimes it helps to know like the kind of shape you're going to be looking for, because there's a lot printed on a big old piece of paper. After I do that, then here's the body measurements again. We looked at that on the back of the pattern, so we don't need to look at that again. This is the fabric cutting layout. This indicates the bust line or the hip line or the waistline or biceps. Lines shown are the cutting lines. However, seam allowances are included unless otherwise indicated. The layouts show approximate positions of pattern pieces. What they're talking about with the layouts, they're talking about this right here. And this rectangle right here is supposed to be your fabric. And this is showing you that the shaded part is the right side of the fabric, so that is the part you're going to fold to the inside, and the unshaded part is the wrong side of the fabric, or what's going to be on the inside of the dress, and you're supposed to have that exposed. The reason for that is that sometimes you'll be making marks on the fabric as you're cutting this out to indicate certain points, and it's better to make a mark on the part of the fabric that's going to be on the inside of the dress. Of course, you always want to use something that's not going to stain, so if you have a fabric that is not easy to get marks out of, then you're going to have to do something like use a different technique, such as using a thread and needle to mark the point instead of chalk or a pencil. But in this case, the fabrics I'm using, it's going to be okay to put a mark on the wrong side of the fabric. So this is for dress A. Let's go ahead and look for dress C. Okay, so dress C right here. So this shows that I'm going to be using two pieces. Their suggestion is I use two separate pieces of fabric to do this, because the skirt, it just takes up a lot of fabric. And I in fact have a different type of fabric, or different fabric for the bodice versus the dress, so that works out great for me. I wanted to mention, this is the first thing that I showed you when we got to the directions. The place where you find out what the shading means is right here. It's just across from those line drawings. And if I zoom in, you can see the right side of the pattern is unshaded, wrong side of the pattern. When they're talking about the pattern, they're talking about the tissue paper. Is dotted, the right side of the fabric, and they're talking about how they're showing it on these direction drawings, not on the actual tissue paper, and how the fabric will be the shaded one and the wrong side of the fabric will be unshaded. So I guess the right side of the pattern and the wrong side of the fabric are going to look about the same. Underneath the telling you what the shading indicates, there is some information about S/T means sizes. T's for tall in Spanish, I think. Selvage, all sizes, and fold. These are, I never have needed to really pay much attention to these, but they, I believe, are printed on the tissue paper, or probably also mentioned, yeah. If I look down here, you can see right there that S/L, which was the selvage, and F/P, which is the fold. So they're trying to say that the fabric is folded along this length right here, and that the selvage will be sticking out like this. I'll show you on a piece of fabric what a selvage is. A selvage is something that is created during the weaving process, when this is mechanically woven on a loom. This end right here, it's not going to fray. It has a special, I guess, end stitch, and if I zoom in really close, you can kind of see the texture on the end there that keeps it from fraying. Now you can see that the selvage is different than the cut end, because the cut end frays readily. This is the other side of the fabric. This is the other selvage right here. The one that I just showed you was printed on with a Joann. It was special Joann's made fabric, especially made for Joann's. This one is just they didn't need to print it on both sides of it. You can also see these little dots that they punch out in addition to this special texture on these selvages, and again the cut side of the fabric. So what I need to do to begin my project, now that I'm looking at my instructions, is I need to hunt for these pieces. Pieces 1, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And I also need to be a little bit familiar with the shapes as I'm hunting for them. So piece 1 is that long skinny rectangle. 11 is this part of the skirt. 12, skirt. That's the front and the back of the skirt. 14, bodice. 13, bodice. 14, the other side of the bodice. That's the front of the bodice that's on the fold right there. 14 and 15, and that will be our little cap sleeves. So when I first pull the tissue paper, it comes out with the instructions. I pull it out and it's this nice, neat, folded up rectangle. I'm going to unfold it. I finished unfolding it. This pattern came with 2 full sheets of tissue paper. I hunted for pattern piece 1, 11, I went ahead and marked them, 12, and 13. On the second piece we've got 14, and back on the first tissue paper we've got 15. I'm going to start cutting these out roughly, not up against the line, but just roughly around the line. I'm just going to do this for a minute because it's hard to film hand cut, but this is what I mean by cutting roughly around the piece. Pretty close, but not directly on the line. I wanted to say something about using a Sharpie. I did not mark piece number 2. It was when I was marking a piece on the second sheet of paper that it bled through the tissue paper. So that's something to keep in mind if you're going to use a Sharpie. The tissue paper, the marker will bleed through the tissue paper, and luckily I have this great cutting mat down so I didn't mess up my dining room table. Something to keep in mind. I could have used a regular ballpoint pen, but I don't normally mark on the tissue paper, and I do normally use a Sharpie because I normally use the markings that I end up doing are on a type of tracing paper that Sharpie doesn't bleed through, and I'll show that to you in a minute. Here's my tracing paper. I like to trace a little outline of whatever I'm using the pattern for. I then put it on I get a manila envelope and I tape my little tracing on here, and I put the number of the pattern so that when I want to use this in the future, sometimes I'll trace like all of the dresses, but I was just focused on this one because it's my favorite one. So I drew that, and then I also took all of after I cut out the pieces that I need, I took all the pieces that are left over, I roughly folded them up, and that's why I like this big envelope, because I don't have to worry about trying to get the factory folds back in the pattern pieces, and now they will fit. The next thing I need to do is iron my pattern paper. Okay, so the goal here is to get these factory folds out and get the wrinkles out. You want to use a dry iron. You don't want any steam because it'll run your tissue paper. I finished ironing this pattern piece. You can still see the remnants of the factory folds. They do not completely come out, and you can still see, where the wrinkles were. The reason why we're ironing it is not to make it look like something that we're going to wear. It's so that these are basically, this is your measuring tool right here, and if there is a fold in it that takes away some of the length, then it will ruin your measurements, and it can make the whole dress hang wonky. So we just want this to be an accurate measuring tool. That is the purpose of ironing the paper, the tissue paper. This is the end of part 1. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the option of tracing your pattern onto tracing paper.